Well, hello, welcome. This is new on Netflix UK, a completely unofficial, generally monthly podcast with the two Robbies, where we take a look at the new stuff on Netflix. Rob, what are we going to be looking at this month?
Well, Robbie, it's a shorter month than normal. We're going to be talking about Behind the Curve, the Netflix documentary about flat earthers.
Okay, here is a clip.
Anyone ever told you the Earth is flat?
The number who think the world is flat is growing. Thousands, if not millions of people.
I can't believe I'm talking about this.
There are millions of flat earthers.
If you look on Google Trends, it's like spike.
There's flat earth dating sites. We've got songs.
Flat Earth model on my bezel.
The sky is the limit. Probably literally.
Ah, I see what you did there.
So Behind the Curve, this is directed by Daniel J. Clark, who is his first major feature. He's made a few different TV shows and things, but nothing you'll ever have heard of. But I thought it was really well done. It follows a bunch of people who actually think the Earth is flat. They do not believe that the Earth is a sphere, a globe, whatever you want to call it. And they believe there's a massive conspiracy, obviously. So they think NASA is involved. They do not think any of the pictures that have been taken of the Earth from space are real. They think all of them are fake. So this is pretty much, it's almost like, the word taboo means something that we don't talk about or is just a bit too far in terms of comedy, in terms of polite conversation. It's not quite the same, is it, conspiracy theory? It's more like we don't treat those people as being pushing the boundaries. We treat them as being infantile and backwards.
Over the boundary.
And the subject of ridicule. But what this documentary does, in I think a really impressive way, is it shows you the day-to-day lives of the people who believe this stuff. And it shows you that they're normal people, that they've got the same emotions, the same issues, and actually some of the same neuroses as the rest of us. It's just that they so happen to have found a community of people that believe something that is completely untrue. And that's basically the premise, I would say, of the whole film. So if you're the kind of person who is a scientist, or you have very rigorous standards of what you expect from people, you will be quite frustrated by this. You will be watching it all the way through, I think, probably going, what? Why do they believe this stuff? But I think it's the power of the film that it actually manages to get beyond that. I was thinking that for a large part of the film. But actually, I was understanding why these people had got into this and had realised that this was something that they wanted to believe. And that's the thing, is that these people do want to believe this. And I think that's the thing that struck me, is it's clear that they're desiring to believe it as well as actually believing it. They want to continue that belief. It brings up all kinds of things. I don't want to spoil too much, but they basically try and prove the Earth is flat. Obviously, that's one of the things that you need to do if you believe the Earth is flat. And they kind of manage it, but don't manage to actually get the result they want. And the reactions to that are part of the most interesting part of the film, which is the reaction to people when they're given new information that isn't the information that they believe in. So it's a kind of film that is frustrating if you're expecting these people to have a major Damascus, conversion back to sanity and back to what we all kind of understand implicitly, that the Earth is a globe. But yeah, I really, and some of the characters were zany, but they were also relatable. It was understandable why they were as they were. So I was really
sorry, I would say there was a scale of zaniness. Some characters came across as being relatively normal people that had kind of got swept up into it. And some people came across as, I don't know what the correct term would be to use, but slightly zanier would be a polite way of putting it.
Yeah, I think the people who were taken more seriously, but it's interesting that even in that community, the people who were taken more seriously were the people who were like stars on YouTube, who would argue this stuff in public, and had been like the people who were almost like the representatives, like almost the presidents and the prime ministers of the movement. That even in a community that is so out of the realms of what we understand of the world, they still manage to have this weird sort of hierarchy where some people know more than others. Oh, this guy's going to try and prove, that the Earth is flat in this really, really rigorous scientific way. So therefore, he gets a speaker slot. And it's almost like the same sort of society we live in the wider world than this slightly mad flat Earth thing, is still represented within that. And so, yeah, you're right. There are these quite mad, people. And I don't like using the word mad but it is. They're not mad, but they're divorced from reality.
And what was also interesting is how even within that really quite extreme area of understanding of the world, they had all fallen out with each other, and there was a real sort of Judean people's front of Judea sort of thing going on, where I couldn't always understand what they were disagreeing about, because they were all clearly wrong, but they all still managed to disagree about in what way they were wrong.
It's basically there is a mainstream, I think, of flat Earth belief. It seemed that the guy who kind of came up with flat Earth, which is rubbish because people have thought of the flat Earth for centuries, some people, but the guy who says he sort of started the movement is seen as like a sort of persona non grata by most of the mainstream now, because he started slagging them off and saying they're in the pay of NASA and all these conspiracies about the people who are flat Earthers. So even the flat Earth conspiracy theory is subject to a conspiracy theory, which is kind of it's again a point that I would make, is that everyone, it's almost like the psychology of it is that you want to feel like you're the most out there with your views, but also that you want those views to be taken seriously. And it's a strange, it's
Isn't
a strange
that a paradox. I like the word paradox.
It is a bit of a paradox, and it's about the psychology of belief and being part of a group. I think that's what most people who are in those kind of groups end up like. They become single issue about one very, 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 very small thing, even if it is like, oh, I don't like this one person.
Well, you'll be delighted to know that I've written a poem to give my summary of it. There was some depth to this story of the flat Earth. It was more than just ridicule and finger-wagging mirth. There was the question of how we should tackle misunderstanding. To those who doubt things like vaccines and the moon landing, should we just laugh, or should we explain that climate change is real and it'll cause a wee bit of pain? And then there was infighting amongst those who think it's flat, with furious anger about this and that. But I most enjoyed the story of love that was unrequited, of a flat Earth fanatic and the woman that made him excited.
Lovely.
I felt there was a really lovely story within it all of this character who was besotted, really. Yeah, with another flat earther. You got little insights occasionally into what their relationship was, but it was obviously a bit one-sided. In a way, it didn't need to be about flat Earth. It could have been about any one of 10 or 20 different conspiracy type subjects. It's more about the treatment of people that have got those views. Right, here's the 10 out of 10 review.
Oh, okay, we're moving on. I wanted to say something else, but okay.
You can come back to it in a minute, but I think this is a very very well written review.
Okay, so what you're saying is the review is more interesting than I am, but go on.
Well, I'm not going to say it's more interesting, but it's more concise.
Okay.
I thought this documentary would be about the flat Earth theory and what they believe and why they believe it. And it was that a little bit, but not much. So I was a bit disappointed at first. But the documentary turned out to be about the flat earthers themselves, what makes them believe it or what makes them not believe it. And that was fascinating. In addition to showing a very respectful portrait of flat earthers, it also interjected commentary from physicists and psychologists who offered their take on the phenomenon. One of the important points that the physicists in the documentary made was that it's easy to just dismiss the flat earth movement as silly nonsense. The problem is, though, that once people start adjusting their reality to fit a nonsensical theory, it affects other parts of their reality as well, and also affects the people around them. And then it goes on to talk about anti-vaxxers, and they mentioned some other things that I've not heard of. Pizzagate, the deep state theory. I don't know what those things are. But it's, quite a good summary. That was the 10 out of 10 review on IMDb.
But can I just say, on the subject of the scientists and the psychologists that they sort of interview as part of it, I actually thought that was quite well done, because what they tried to do was keep the flat earthers at the foreground and then just sort of interject a little bit of, this is why, but not in a sort of, the scientists didn't come across as patronizing. They weren't kind of trying to kind of, I think they knew they weren't going to. No, they weren't. I mean, I would have been, frankly, but I'm not a scientist, and I think that's actually quite a positive of the film, is it's not pointing the finger and saying It's looking at these people as people and saying, well, there's a reason for this. Why are they believing this? And trying to get to the bottom of that a little bit.
Okay, this is the 1 out of 10 review.
Go. Yeah.
By someone called Warnoldiv. They spend a lot of time talking of anything but proof of flat Earth. Their relationships, talk shows, license plate, flat Earth merchandise, but not really what their theory is. Prove it to me. Dum dum dum. Oh, and that people with a certain level of education won't or can't believe in flat Earth because they're brainwashed, I guess. I don't understand that reasoning. So it's sort of similar to what you were saying, Rob, is that you'd like to have seen a little bit about why they believe it and why it's nonsense.
Yeah.
I mean, do we need to explain why it's nonsense? Maybe we do. But
I
think
let's just experiment. Let's see whether we can explain why it's nonsense. Because actually it's such an established fact that it's difficult to explain, I think.
Well, if you stand on quite a tall hill, you can sort of see. Can you see the curvature of the Earth?
I'm not sure you can see.
You can only see to a certain point, can't you?
Yeah, the horizon. Yeah.
You can't see on and on and on and on because the Earth starts to curve and you can't see over the top of it. Is that true?
Yeah, that's true. That the thing that they said in the film, and I've seen said otherwise, the most obvious thing is what was observed many, many years ago, that you start to see the bottom of which way around is it? The bottom of the boat go before the top of the boat when you see it going over the horizon.
Say that again, but a bit slower. You start to see.
You see this? Is it the top or the? Now I'm confusing myself. The top or the bottom of the boat first disappears, and then you see the other part disappear. But then also, it's just the idea that this could be like a conspiracy that all of the photos from space have been faked, and people who've been to space haven't actually been to space. All of them. And that's never come out. None of them have ever said, actually, it was a fake. I wasn't actually there. I didn't actually go up. So,
Let's play an area where you do have a much better understanding and insight, which is predicting the IMDb scores, which is something that you tend to do with startling accuracy. Yeah. So what score do you think Behind the Curve received?
I'm going to almost not hedge my bets, but I'm going to go with a pretty average 7 exactly for this one.
6.5. So not a bad guess.
Not a bad guess.
Not a bad guess.
That's a bit low, I think. I mean, I would have given that a 6 or 7, maybe a 7.
Well, everyone else disagrees, Rob.
Do they? Well, okay, fair enough. That's fair enough. Well,
5,258 people disagree with you.
Wow,
not for the first time after your political dabblings. Anyway, let's move on. So our new format, right, is it's built for the busy lifestyle in that we're really going to look at one new thing each time, and then we're also going to give one sort of recommendation of something that's been on there a while. So it's my turn this month, and the next month you're going to give a recommendation of something that's been on there a little while. My recommendation for this month is it is actually relatively new, which is Russian Doll. I'll play a little clip of it at this point. So here we go.
Are you going to tell me what's going on?
I keep dying and reliving the same night.
Does it hurt?
Yes.
You seem fine.
I'm not fine. I'm questioning my own sanity. We got to take the fire escape.
I have a fire escape? I have to change my Airbnb listing then.
What was wrong with the stairs?
It's a long story involving multiple deaths.
Yeah, this is much safer.
I've never lasted this long.
So you may have heard quite a lot about this over the last few weeks, but I think it's still worth talking about. It's an 8-part TV series. It stars Natasha Lyonne. I don't know if that's how you pronounce it, but she's from Orange is the New Black is probably where she's best known from. And it is a very sort of quirky, kooky comedy drama. It's fairly adult in its themes at times. And the premise is that there is this party being held for her, which is a birthday party. It's the kind of party you see on TV where everyone is just sort of dancing around, having an amazing time, rather than these sort of real parties where you have a few people sat around paper plate sausage rolls. But they on this program, right? They have these. It's a great big party. It's very exciting, very noisy party. And then very early on, this is not a spoiler, she dies and comes back at the same point, back in this toilet in this bathroom. So at this point, of course, you're thinking, well, this is Groundhog Day, and I'm seeing Groundhog Day again, rather appropriately. But it kind of maintains your interest by taking several quite curious twists. I think it gets quite a good balance of not showing you too much repeated and content, and the music choices are quite good, because with this sort of format it's quite easy to become irritated by watching the same thing over and over again. I think they just about get that right. I think the way where it differs to Groundhog Day, which in my mind is kind of a straight up feel good, funny, quite a light comedy, this is a program that is looking for you to find depth in it. And the various articles online where people have found various depths. There was one I was reading about, it reminded them of addiction and about reliving things that are killing you over and over again. I think it wants you to get a deeper reaction from it. This is why I felt you would like it, Rob, because you're quite, if I can be honest, you're quite pretentious, aren't you? You like that sort of deep art house sort of thing. You love all that rubbish. So so there are many ways you could sort of read it, and it steers you towards a sort of certain reading towards the end.
Okay, so my first question is, it sounds very much like a sort of a science fiction sort of premise, or like a fantasy premise wrapped up in a comedy show. So it's more comedy than fantasy, in a sense, or is it kind of?
It's comedy in that it's. I don't know if you saw Orange Is the New Black, but I mean that was very funny, but you wouldn't call it a comedy. It was tackling some quite weighty subjects and looking for you to sort of get a reaction to that, but it was pretty funny at the same time. So it's funny because it's well written, I would say, rather than because people are honking red noses and making fart gags, that sort of thing. I mean, I would say I always say this, but I think it probably could be 6 episodes rather than 8. I think at times you could have maybe cut a bit down, but the episodes are quite short. What I have found quite curious is that, and they've in the last few days, series 2 is being commissioned, and I won't give away the ending at all, but it felt to me like it had quite a good solid ending. I was quite satisfied with the ending. I won't say anything more than that, but it's, interesting. Obviously it was popular enough, they thought we've got to do another series of this somehow. So so that's coming. So that's my recommendation for this month, Rob.
Can I ask you a question about it as well? Like, what I was thinking of some of the other films that have been similar to Groundhog Day in the last few years, like Edge of Tomorrow with Tom Cruise and Emily Blunt, and like what was the other one? Source Code with Jake Gyllenhaal. So idea of reliving the same day over and over again, but different things happening. What I want to know is there a variation enough? It sounds like there is in what happens in the storyline. It's not kind of eternal.
Well, Source Code, I mean, it's certainly nothing like Source Code. It's not an action film. It's not a sort of comedy romance like Groundhog Day was. Edge of Tomorrow I've not seen. What sort of genre does that fit into?
It's kind of science fiction. Aliens invading the Earth, and Tom Cruise is the one who has to sort of stop them. But he has to keep reliving.
It's not aliens invading the Earth sort of stuff. No. It feels more kind of modern and edgy, the kind of thing that northern liberal snowflakes like. Not North London. I'm really digging a hole, so I think I'll just stop it there. What I was wondering, actually, you might know this. The premise of Groundhog Day, this is maybe a silly question, was Groundhog Day the first film to do that? So the first sort of piece of entertainment to do that? Or is there another film that Groundhog Day was leaning on?
I believe so. And actually, can I just make a recommendation for another podcast? I know I shouldn't really do this because everyone should just listen to New on Netflix UK, and that should be all they ever listen to because it's so brilliant.
Of course.
But there is a really good podcast called Beyond the Screenplay, and they discuss Groundhog Day in one of their episodes, and it's genuinely a brilliant episode because it goes into all the depths of why that works as a story and why it's so hard to copy it without it looking like Groundhog Day. You see what I mean? So it's what we always refer to, and yeah, it probably was the first sort of mainstream version of that story. There's, I think, in myth and legend, and maybe in certain folk religions and things like that, there's been this like myth of someone continually waking up the same day and stuff. But I think that was the first time it was done in Hollywood and in a way that is like mass popular, and that's why it keeps being referred to. I guess. Yeah.
Well, your challenge, Rob, for our next encounter is to find out if there is another, like some 1950s Italian film. If you like that sort of thing. That did the same thing that it was a reference to, because that's what I was just sort of curious to know. What are we going to look at next month?
We're going to be looking at When They See Us, which is a 4-part series on Netflix, directed by Ava DuVernay, who did The 13th, and she also did A Wrinkle in Time, which was rubbish. But, she could be good on this one.
Okay. Well, all that remains is for us to thank our team behind the scenes. Vera on audio mixing, Dave who does the graphics for our website, and Agatha who does our tanning and hair and makeup. Anyone else we've forgotten, Rob?
Yeah, you always forget Sheila. There's the tea, makes the tea.
Thanks, Sheila. Just pop it down there. That's great. All right, thanks very much. Bye-bye.
Bye.